For too long, Vladimir Putin has held steadfast in his belief that victory in the war against Ukraine was inevitable. He envisioned a swift triumph, yet that vision crumbled as reality set in. Instead of wearing down Ukraine, the conflict has dragged on. In Putin's eyes, the key to victory now hinges on persuading Ukraine to concede territory in the Donbas region, a goal seemingly slipping further from reach. Amid this turmoil, the unexpected voice of Finland emerged, delivering a powerful message that left the Kremlin reeling. On October 18, a notable moment unfolded when Finnish President Alexander Stubb openly declared that Finland would never recognize Crimea as a legitimate part of Russia. This response came during a BBC interview, highlighting a stark refusal to concede to Putin's aggression. The annexation, which took place back in 2014, has become a point of contention, and Stubb's declaration echoes the sentiments of the Finnish people who have gradually distanced their nation from Russian influence over the years. A report from the Center for European Reform revealed the stark decline in Finnish imports from Russia, plummeting from 18% in 2012 to a mere 8% by 2022. Coinciding with the escalation of the conflict. This significant drop signifies Finland's commitment to resisting Russia's coercive grip, illustrating with data what Stubb articulated: territorial acquiescence is off the table. But Stubb's comments didn't stop at Crimea. He took a firm stance on Donetsk and Luhansk, asserting that these regions are not Russia's to claim. His words: a decisive repudiation of Putin's territorial ambitions, assert that the Ukrainians alone will determine their fate. The Kremlin's desperation for control over Donbas, a region rich in resources, has not gone unnoticed. The allure of Donbas lies not just in its strategic importance, but also in its vast economic potential. Industry experts note that the area is endowed with precious metals and fertile farmland, making it a coveted prize for the war-torn nation. Currently holding approximately 40% of Ukraine's metal resources, Russia eyes the economic benefits of Donbas, hoping it could stabilize their faltering economy in the post-war era. Moreover, the Donbas region holds immense symbolic significance for Russia. With a large native Russian-speaking population, this area serves as a narrative tool for Putin, fueling unfounded claims of mistreatment by the Ukrainian government. If Russia invoked its claim successfully, it would provide legitimacy to their ongoing invasion. Yet, despite this strategy, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky remains resolute, refusing to sacrifice Donbas for a hollow peace. As tensions mount, Stubb has thrown down the gauntlet, emphasizing that Finland will not recognize any Russian annexation of Donbas, further isolating Putin in the global arena. In a stunning second blow, Stubb highlighted the necessity for Ukraine to join the European Union, a final challenge to Putin's ambitions. While Putin has made empty claims about Ukraine's EU aspirations, Finland's assertive stance coupled with Ukraine's move towards EU membership disrupts his strategy. As discussions continue, a pivotal question remains: will Ukraine secure its place in the EU and possibly NATO? With ongoing negotiations and growing support from European leaders, the path to membership looks promising. Yet questions linger about the timeline. If Finland's president believes Ukraine could integrate into the EU soon, can the promises of a united Europe withstand the pressures of ongoing conflict? As the pieces continue to move on this geopolitical chessboard, the outcome remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: the stakes have never been higher. In a world where power dynamics shift like the tides, Finland's audacious stance against Russia sends shockwaves through the Kremlin. October 17 marked a pivotal moment when Finnish President Alexander Stubb firmly declared Finland would never recognize Russian claims over Crimea. But this declaration wasn't isolated; it expanded to encompass a resolute message regarding the Luhansk and Donetsk regions in Donbas. President Stubb emphasized that territory seized through invasion does not equate to rightful ownership. The determination did not waver: the only authority on land belongs to the Ukrainians. As he pointedly addressed Russian President Vladimir Putin, Stubb made it abundantly clear: this land is not Russia's to seize, no matter how desperately Putin desires it. Amid this brewing conflict, the Donbas region looms large in strategic importance for Russia, offering not only economic advantages but also a wealth of symbolic significance. The area, once a booming industrial hub, now lies tarnished, yet its agricultural potential remains immense, making it a coveted breadbasket for Europe. But that's not all. Deep beneath the soil lie extensive reserves of precious minerals that spark Putin's ambitions. Current reports indicate that Russia controls about 40% of Ukraine's metal resources, with the Shevchenko field in Donetsk housing one of the largest lithium deposits in the nation. The stakes are sky high. The Donbas region cradles approximately 56% of Ukraine's hard coal reserves, valued at around $12 trillion. This is only a sliver of the reported $12.5 trillion in mineral and gas assets that the Russian occupiers now claim. This figurative gold mine represents a potential lifeline for Russia's economy after the war. The strategic port of Mariupol offers year-round access to the Black Sea, a prized post that could grant Russia control over these vital waters. If Putin can bolster his naval presence there alongside the annexed Crimea, he could dominate the Black Sea, significantly altering the region's power balance. However, the symbolic significance of Donbas runs deeper than just economics. The region is home to an overwhelming number of native Russian speakers, a point that Russia has exploited to justify its invasion. Yet, as political scientists analyze the situation, they emphasize that occupation does not dictate legitimacy. If Ukraine were to concede the Donbas region, Putin might parade his claims like trophies, but the reality remains, this land belongs to the Ukrainians. President Volodymyr Zelensky has made it unequivocally clear that he will not part with Donbas in the name of peace. Stubbs' intervention adds yet another layer of determination, asserting that any annexation that circumvents Ukraine's choice will face Finnish condemnation. In a remarkable display of solidarity, Stubb reinforced Finland's vision: Ukraine must not only retain its independence but also have an open path to join the European Union and possibly NATO. As tensions escalate, the world watches closely. Is Putin's acceptance of Ukraine joining the EU merely a facade? With Stubb championing Ukraine's cause, the question lingers: will the European Union welcome Ukraine with open arms before the decade ends? As negotiations unfold, the air is thick with anticipation and uncertainty. A long road lies ahead, yet the fight for sovereignty rages on, igniting hopes and dreams for a brighter future. In the previous segment, we uncovered Donbass's immense wealth: coal reserves worth about $12 trillion, plus mineral assets totaling $12.5 trillion. Putin eyes this as a golden lifeline to rebuild Russia's battered economy once the Ukraine conflict fades. Can you hear the distant rumble of Soviet-era factories awakening, their metallic clang echoing across frosted fields? The scent of freshly scraped earth lingers in Mariupol's port, where icy winds whip the Black Sea into frothy waves. Al Jazeera reveals Russia's strategic dream: year-round access here, merging with Crimea's grip, would let Moscow dominate the sea. Imagine naval fleets slicing through dark waters, guns poised, as if the ocean itself bows to Putin's fist. But deeper still, beyond crude power plays, lies the symbolic pull of Donbas. Over 75% in Donetsk speak Russian at home, feel the warmth of shared words in cozy kitchens, the legacy of Soviet migrations like displaced echoes from a forgotten era. In Luhansk, it's 68.8%. Putin spins this as proof, claiming Ukraine mistreated these people, unsubstantiated whispers of oppression to justify his bloody crusade. Eric Heron, a West Virginia University expert, tells Al Jazeera, Russia touts false grievances, making Donbas the heart of their invasion narrative. That myth fuels Putin's fire, humbling him before world opinion. Picture Ukraine ceding this land. Would Putin strut like a victorious tyrant, his justifications valid? Or is it a Trojan horse, Russia edging closer, borders stretched like taut skin over old wounds? Eyeing the rest of Ukraine's heart? Don't forget, once entrenched, who stops him from striking deeper? Ukrainian President Zelensky vows no handover for peace, his voice sharp as winter snow cracking underfoot. Yet Alexander Stubb, Finland's leader, delivers a stinging rebuke. Any grab of Donbas without Ukraine's say? Illegitimate. Unrecognized. This leaves Putin exposed, his regional bullying scorned by Europe. How does it feel, Vladimir, watching Finland reject your ill-gotten gains, your supposed empire crumbling like sand? But wait, as Russia scrambles for cover, could U.S. ties with Donald Trump offer a lifeline? What shocking twist lurks next? In a remarkable showdown of wills, Finnish President Alexander Stubb has sent an unambiguous message to Vladimir Putin: any annexation of the Donbas region will not be recognized. Stubb's declaration echoes like a dramatic bell tolling in a quiet town. Will this bold stance alter the course of the war? This is just the beginning of a gripping saga. Putin may have imagined that his grasp on Donbass was inevitable, a foregone conclusion. But now, with the weight of national resolve behind him, Stubb has thrown a significant barrier in Putin's path. No more than mere words, one might think, yet these declarations resonate strongly across Europe. They serve as a powerful reminder to Russia that domination won't be easily achieved, prompting speculation about how far Stubb could go. But the stakes don't end with Donbass. In a calculated turn, Stubb emphasized the need for Ukraine to secure membership in the European Union and, ideally, NATO. Imagine an unwavering Ukraine rising from the ashes of conflict, not just existing, but thriving as a member of these powerful alliances. Stubb passionately urged, "We must ensure Ukraine retains its independence and sovereignty when this war concludes." However, is this merely posturing? Putin's own comments suggest he never truly opposed Ukraine joining the EU, or so he claims. Yet one can't shake the feeling that these statements may mask deeper intentions. After all, what lies in the heart of a leader who has tried to dominate a neighboring country? The truth is that Putin views Ukraine as devoid of independent nationality. As the war rages on, two pivotal questions loom large: can Ukraine fully cement its place in the EU? And what about NATO? While initial steps have been taken, thousands of bureaucratic hurdles stand in the way. Yet Europe appears determined to embrace Ukraine, with tantalizing promises of integration that may not take as long as anticipated. Time ticks slowly. Will the dreams of millions be realized before the decade's end? With every twist and turn, the unfolding narrative reveals just how entwined these leaders' fates have become. What happens next could change the landscape of Europe forever. Will Stubb's bravery inspire other nations to follow suit? Or will Putin find a way to undermine this united front? As tensions mount, the world watches with bated breath. What will the next chapter bring? Amid the tension brewing in Eastern Europe, one question looms large: what if a country's pursuit of independence is perceived as a threat instead? For years, Vladimir Putin has harbored a belief that the war with Ukraine would be a swift victory for Russia. But as we dive deeper into this conflict, the narrative takes a sharp turn. Instead of the easy conquest Putin envisioned, Ukraine has fought back fiercely, and Finland is making its stance clear. Picture this: the cold winds of the Arctic Circle whispering warnings to the Kremlin, as Finnish President Alexander Stubb makes a bold proclamation. He stated unequivocally on a recent broadcast that Finland will never recognize Crimea as Russian territory. This peninsula, seized by force in 2014, remains a thorn in the side of geopolitical relations, stoking resentment and a sense of injustice. The Kremlin is reeling from Stubb's declaration. It's a wake-up call that shakes the very foundations of Russian authority. In the shadows of this growing tension lies Europe's involvement. The EU is not merely a spectator, it's actively engaging with Ukraine on its path to membership. As of December 2023, access negotiations with the EU were officially launched, indicating a commitment to reshape Europe's future. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen affirmed this path, emphasizing the aspiration shared between Ukrainians and Europeans for a joint future. But will this dream be realized before the decade's end? Stubb's vision goes beyond borders. He emphasizes the necessity for Ukraine to join not only the EU but also NATO organizations that could robustify Ukraine's sovereignty. With a past shrouded in conflict, the looming question remains: will Ukraine's aspirations be met with support, or will they encounter relentless objections from Putin? As Stubb boldly stands up to Putin's ambitions, we are left pondering: can Ukraine navigate the treacherous waters ahead to achieve both EU and NATO membership? The notion of Ukraine aligning itself with Europe brings forth two critical inquiries. First, can Ukraine make its EU membership a reality amidst such turmoil? Second, what about NATO? Historically, Putin has vehemently opposed NATO expansion, seeing it as a direct threat to Russia's sphere of influence. Stubb's words echo across the continent, revealing a complex web of alliances and oppositions. In recollecting the days of the invasion, one cannot ignore Putin's audacity to believe he could erase Ukraine's sovereignty, thinking the nation would fall under his rule before the EU's influence could take hold. Yet, as echoes of conflict clash against the walls of power, the tenacity of the Ukrainian spirit beams brightly. With the stakes high, it's imperative to understand the economic motivations behind Moscow's obsession with Donbass. Rich in resources and historical significance, this region symbolizes more than just land, it represents power and control. If Ukraine were to relinquish Donbass, would that embolden Putin further? Or would Finland's resistance and the EU's support offer a counterbalance to his aspirations? In this fight for autonomy and recognition on the global stage, can Finland's unwavering stance spark a resolve amongst allies? Or will the shadows of past conquests continue to hang heavy over discussions of sovereignty? The narrative is continually unfolding, and every statement, every retaliatory act adds depth to this complex tale. Indeed, this clash of wills between nations will determine not just the fate of Ukraine, but the balance of power in Europe itself. For years, Vladimir Putin has stubbornly held on to the belief that Russia would swiftly emerge victorious in the war against Ukraine. Initially, the plan was to wear Ukraine down, but as time dragged on, reality painted a different picture. For Putin, the goal has now shifted to convincing Ukraine to concede territory in Donbass. However, if Finland has anything to say about it, that may not even happen. Finland recently dealt a stunning blow to Putin, sending a clear message that it will never recognize the Russian annexation of Crimea. Finnish President Alexander Stubb made this position explicitly clear during a BBC radio interview, stating, "There will never be a time when Finland acknowledges Crimea as part of Russia." Despite Russia's control over the peninsula for more than a decade, Stubb remains resolute. Since the annexation, Finland has increasingly distanced itself from Russia in trade, a trend that speaks volumes about their intentions. In fact, while imports from Russia constituted 18% of Finland's trade in 2012, that percentage plummeted to just 8% by 2022, the year Russia invaded Ukraine. Stubb's words reflect Finland's long-standing actions and underline a significant development. Not only will Finland stand against the recognition of Crimea, but they will also reject any claims to territories taken by Russia during this ongoing conflict. Donbass is particularly critical for Putin. The region's economic wealth, including precious minerals and fertile farmland, entices him to push for control. In this strategic game, he seeks to restore Russia's economy by exploiting Donbass, perceiving it as a possible gold mine after the war. However, what might be more significant to Putin is the symbolic power that Donbass represents. With a majority of the population speaking Russian, Putin uses this as justification for the invasion. The narrative he promotes is clear: the conflict is about protecting Russian speakers in Ukraine. But the truth is far more complex. If Ukraine were to surrender Donbass, it would affirm Putin's twisted claims. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has firmly rejected any notion of trading territory for peace, maintaining that the fate of Donbass lies entirely in Ukrainian hands. This stance was echoed by Stubb during his interview, where he declared that any attempt by Russia to claim Donbass would not be tolerated. The time for negotiations based on territorial deals is over. Only Ukraine has the authority to decide its land's future. But as the geopolitical maneuvering intensifies, questions arise: will Ukraine be able to join the European Union? And what about its aspiration to join NATO? The path to EU membership appears bright for Ukraine, with negotiations officially underway. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen emphasized that the EU is ready to welcome Ukraine as they fight for a shared future. Yet, the NATO question looms large. Trump's recent statements suggest he views NATO membership for Ukraine as a deal-breaker for Russia, complicating the alliance's stance. The US, as a significant NATO player, has historically resisted Ukraine's inclusion, with past presidents denying membership for fear of escalating tensions with Russia. As the conflict continues, Ukraine's desire for NATO membership reflects a bold hope for protection against further Russian aggression. Should Ukraine secure NATO status, Putin's calculations would change dramatically, as Article 5 would be triggered, obligating NATO allies to defend Ukraine. Thus, questions abound. Can Ukraine navigate the complex landscapes of international relations while standing strong against an aggressor? With Stubb's messages resonating across Europe, the stakes have never been higher. The game is on, and the world watches as the future of Ukraine hangs in the balance. In a world where the stakes of war loom large, one leader's vision for expansion clashes palpably with the desire for freedom and sovereignty. In recent months, Vladimir Putin seemed convinced that victory in Ukraine was just a matter of time. But as the war drags on, reality has begun to sink in. There were plans to wear Ukraine down, yet those ambitions have faltered. In Putin's eyes, winning means forcing Ukraine to concede territory in the Donbass. But now, a thunderous ultimatum comes from an unexpected ally, Finland. Finnish President Alexander Stubb recently delivered a message that echoes with defiance. He declared, without hesitation, that Finland will never recognize Crimea as Russian territory. For over a decade, this peninsula, seized by Putin in 2014, has been a thorn in the side of Ukrainian aspirations and European peace. Yet Finland is steadfast, retaliating against Russian aggression by cutting trade ties more significantly with each passing year, a drop from 18% to a mere 8% of imports from Russia since the crisis began. Stubb's statements weren't limited to Crimea. He also set his sights on the contentious regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, which are vital to both Ukraine and Russia. With Russia holding around 70% of Donetsk, Stubb firmly stated these regions are not for Russia to claim. The future of these territories should rest solely in the hands of Ukrainians. As Putin's ambitions swell, the desperation extends beyond military gains. He seeks economic resurgence through the rich resources of Donbass. Yet, could it be that Finland's voice is a harbinger of unity among European nations? Stubb also expressed a bold hope that Ukraine could join the EU and NATO, ensuring its independence and territorial integrity. The concept of Ukraine becoming a NATO member poses a seismic challenge for Putin. Under Article 5, an attack on Ukraine could mean a war with all 32 NATO allies. Imagine the implications of such a conflict. So why does Finland support Ukraine's NATO aspirations? Many believe it is a precautionary measure against potential Russian aggression. Finland shares a history that shrouds it in the cold shadows of territorial loss to Russia, having surrendered 10% of its land after the Winter War of 1939. Finland knows the high price of underestimating a tyrant. As President Stubb boldly states his support for Ukraine's EU and NATO membership, one has to wonder, what lengths will Putin go to if the West circles in tighter? Will he lash out in anger over losing the struggle for Donbass amid a growing NATO presence? The line between security and provocation becomes perilously thin. The West, united under Finland's banner, has sent a powerful message: any erosion of Ukrainian sovereignty will be met with strength. What comes next is uncertain, a complicated web where the past intertwines with urgent modern-day ramifications. Could this be the moment that reshapes the landscape of not just Ukraine, but all of Europe? The eyes of the world remain fixed, awaiting the next move from a leader who, with each passing day, may feel the walls of isolation closing in. Will Putin choose war once again, or will the resistance of nations like Finland turn the tide for Ukraine, securing a future of freedom? The unfolding drama promises to be a saga steeped in courage and conflict, leaving us all to ponder what price peace truly holds. In an unexpected twist of fate, Vladimir Putin remains convinced of his impending victory in Ukraine, despite the war dragging on longer than anticipated. This was supposed to be a swift takeover, a mere exercise in attrition against Ukraine. Now, the stakes have escalated. Convincing Ukraine to surrender Donbass would only give Putin a fraction of his ambitions. However, Finland has delivered a stunning rebuke to his aspirations, stating unequivocally that Putin's authority will never be recognized. The very core of the Kremlin trembles at this bold assertion. Finnish President Alexander Stubb, in a stirring interview on BBC Radio, made his intentions clear about Crimea, a territory occupied since 2014. He firmly declared that Finland will never recognize it as Russian land. Finland's stance has become even more resolute, reducing its reliance on Russian trade from a notable 18% in 2012 to a mere 8% in 2022, coinciding with the invasion of Ukraine. Stubb's words resonate the solid resolve of a nation that has felt the sting of territorial loss since the Winter War, a lesson carved into their history, and they refuse to let Ukraine experience similar sorrow. But it wasn't just Crimea that Stubb referenced. He addressed the broader implications of Russia's invasion and highlighted that any claim over Donetsk and Luhansk would also be deemed illegitimate. The underlying message was clear: the land belongs to the Ukrainians, and any attempt by Russia to stake a claim is an affront to their sovereignty. As these nations grapple with the specter of war, the Donbas region looms large in Putin's plans, offering economic treasures and strategic advantages. Imagine the rich resources of Donbas, its fertile soil, its rich mineral reserves, all factors that fuel Putin's desire for control. The port city of Mariupol, now under Russian influence, could grant complete Russian dominance of the Black Sea, but the real lure is the symbolic importance of Donbas itself. For Putin, controlling this area validates his narratives surrounding Russian identity and regional dominance. Can he truly maintain his grip, or will the tides of war turn against him? With every challenge, Ukraine stands firm. President Volodymyr Zelensky has made it clear that surrendering Donbas for peace is not an option. Stubb partners with this resolve, advocating for Ukraine's ascension into the European Union and NATO, strengthening its capabilities against further aggression. But questions linger: is NATO membership genuinely feasible for Ukraine? What pressure could be exerted to detour Putin from his ambitious designs? Striking a resounding note of defiance, Stubb emphasizes the necessity of not just an enticing deal but a firm hand, one capable of compelling Russia back to the negotiating table. It raises eyebrows: will Donald Trump leverage his influence in this high-stakes game? As he prepares for a pivotal meeting in Hungary with Putin, the stakes feel higher than ever. Will this dialogue lead to genuine peace or merely sharpen Russia's agenda? As Finland boldly declares its support for Ukraine, the world watches closely, bracing for the next chapter in this unfolding drama, where every move could spell triumph or disaster. For far too long, Vladimir Putin has clung to the belief that Russia would emerge victorious in the Ukraine war. What was supposed to be a swift triumph turned into a grueling stalemate. Expectations of attriting Ukraine into submission faded, leaving Russia scrambling. Now, Putin's narrowed focus is on pressuring Ukraine to cede territory in Donbas, a prize Russia claims as its own. Yet, even this reduced ambition might slip away. Finland has delivered a stinging rebuke to Putin, declaring that his authority in those lands will never gain official recognition. The Kremlin's core trembled under the blow, but Putin might still clutch a lifeline through U.S. President Donald Trump. Has Finland just pummeled Putin's dreams of dominance with unrelenting force, or does Trump's involvement twist the narrative into a betrayal game? Tracing back, imagine the chill of that icy breeze whipping across Helsinki in 2014, the acrid scent of political upheaval lingering like smoke from burning bridges. Trade dwindled, a sensory reminder of Finland's calculated detachment from Russian dependency. Imports plummeted from 18% in 2012 to 8% by 2022, a tactile cut deeper than any frostbite. Stubb's words echoed like thunderclaps, reaffirming that Crimea, annexed in 2014, and any Donbas region seized by Russia, would never be acknowledged as rightfully Russian. Those occupied territories, Luhansk nearly fully under control and Donetsk at 70%, belong to Ukrainians alone. No invasion changes ownership. Symbolic? Donbas pulsates with native Russian speakers, 75% in Donetsk and 68.8% in Luhansk. Relics of Soviet migrations turned into Putin's bait. Economically, it's a gold rush, rich coal reserves worth $12 trillion alongside minerals and gas scams totaling $12.5 trillion, plus the CVS field with one of Ukraine's largest lithium deposits. Strategically, Mariupol's port promises year-round Black Sea access, amplifying Russia's naval grip. Yet, Putin craves that symbolic veneer to legitimize his invasion myth, inching ever closer to devouring more of Ukraine. Zelensky vows not to trade Donbas for peace, determined to join the EU and NATO, preserving sovereignty. Now, striking again, Stubb insists Ukraine must emerge independent and whole, a beacon for the West. Why would Stubb double down, essentially slapping Putin twice? What secret fear fuels this brazen stand against a bear already cornered? Luhansk and Donetsk, those ravaged Donbas heartlands, still throb with the echoes of displacement. The metallic tang of unexploited coal dust hangs in the air, a forgotten promise of wealth. Finland's voice cuts through, ensuring Russia can't legitimize theft, slamming doors on EU-NATO aspirations that Putin grudgingly tolerates only to mask his deeper aim, erasing Ukraine's existence. Can Putin evade the international spotlight, or is the trap closing with every evasive flight? Amidst thundering engines and the distant roar of airspace closures, Putin skirts European skies to reach sanctuary in Hungary. Hungary's exit from the ICC in June shields him from a March 2023 arrest warrant, the system under no bond to enforce it. What path might this Trump talks take? Trump mirrors Putin's NATO no for Ukraine. Yet whispers of compromise swirl. Exiled oligarch Mikhail Khodorkovsky senses a signal from Putin for a deal, a hint amid Hungary's surprise meeting. Yet shadows loom, he twists into doubt about Putin's desires, blind to Trump's motives. On October 19, an independent report captures Trump's Fox News remarks, urging territorial concessions. He's going to take something, Trump notes, painting Putin as a property holder after battle. Donbass, then, looms as the prize if Trump pushes ceding, he'd dangle a juicy carrot, overshadowing Stubbs' firm stick. Glancing back to that sensory storm of 2012's trade ties, the sharp sting of severance lingers, contrasting Putin's grasping hunger. Zelensky counters, urging Western pressure to break Putin, willing even to join the Hungary summit on October 19. The air grows thinner for Putin. Will Trump's pivot carve a new wound or forge an unhumiliating escape? The unfamiliar creak of shifting alliances prickles the skin, smells of betrayal brewing over uncertain horizons. Is Trump's carrot really an olive branch, or a poisoned chalice that humiliates Putin further while dangling false hope? The Ukraine-NATO dream smolders like embers, but Hungary's withdrawal, ICC defection, and Zelensky's fiery likening of Putin to a stronger-than-Hamas terrorist with the world's second-largest army, dangerous comparisons set the stage for confrontation. Flights evade capture, the chill altitude pressing like a weight, voices crackle with urgency. Yet, as October 19 tensions peak, Trump's words cast long shadows. What unseen twist awaits in Hungary's guarded chambers? In the heart of Europe, a battle rages on, echoing through time and history. For far too long, Vladimir Putin has been engulfed in the illusion of a swift triumph in Ukraine. What was supposed to be a decisive victory has, instead, spiraled into a quagmire. This isn't just a war, it's a clash of ideologies, identities, and power on the grandest scale. As the dust settled on the Kremlin's grand plans, they found themselves grappling not with a mere opponent, but a resilient Ukraine. The formidable fortress of Ukraine has proven harder to breach than anticipated, evading Russia's grasp. The terrain of Donbass, a vital area he desperately wishes to claim, remains a battlefield where dreams of conquest clash with the relentless spirit of resistance. In a striking turn of events, Finnish President Alexander Stubb has cast a monumental shadow over this escalating tension. Delivering a powerful message, he declared that Finland would never recognize Crimea as part of Russia. This declaration serves as a double-edged sword for Putin, who believed he would expand his influence effortlessly. In that moment, the air was thick with the scent of defiance, a clear signal that the West remains united in opposing the Kremlin's ambitions. But Finland's stance is a mere reflection of an evolving narrative. The conflict isn't just about territory, it's about identity and sovereignty. Stubb laid bare a harsh truth: any Russian claim, including that of Luhansk and Donetsk, is an affront to Ukraine's autonomy. With 70% of Donetsk under Russian control, the stakes are higher than ever. What fails to dwindle is the fervor for independence among Ukrainians, echoing the soul of their nation. President Zelensky, echoing Stubb's uncompromising tone, stressed the necessity for the United States and its allies to apply relentless pressure on Putin. He likened their struggle to that of Israel facing Hamas, emphasizing the stark imbalance of power. The irony is palpable: despite boasting one of the largest militaries in the world, Russia continues to flounder against a nation that refuses to bend. In a stunning twist, the famed summer offensive intended to reshape the war instead revealed cracks in Russia's facade. Instead of a triumphant march forward, the Russian advance has crumbled, costing them a staggering 5 times more troops than Ukraine has lost. Each day, the illusion of Russian invincibility fades, revealing the sheer tenacity of Ukrainian spirit as it shines against a backdrop of despair. Now, as the dust settles on yet another failed offensive, what remains is a burned-out Russian military and an increasingly desperate Putin. The anticipation builds: will he find redemption or ignite further conflict? The ground shakes underfoot as whispers of engagement between nations grow louder. The world's eyes are fixated on the impending confrontation at the Hungary summit. Will it be the moment that shakes this grim stalemate, or will it simply mask the inevitable chaos that lies ahead? With uncertainty hanging like fog, a crucial question lingers: can unity among Western powers be the crucial key needed to break the chains of Putin's ambitions? The world waits, breath held. As battles rage and parables of courage unfold on this dramatic stage of history. In the unfolding drama between Russia and Ukraine, a conflict that many believed would result in a swift Russian victory has instead turned into an agonizing stalemate for Vladimir Putin. Initially, he envisioned a rapid success for his nation, but as the months dragged on, that dream faded into something darker. Russia, despite its formidable military size and resources, has faced a barrage of setbacks, losing ground consistently while Ukraine displays an unwavering resolve. As we enter the later months of the year, the much-anticipated summer offensive, which the Kremlin had promoted as a decisive turning point, has all but fizzled. Reports within Western media suggest that even as Russia claims minor territorial advancements, the cost has been staggering. Territory gained is negligible, while the casualties mount to shocking levels. Faced with relentless resistance from Ukraine, which is grappling with its own human resource challenges, there are whispers that Russia is somehow managing to augment its military ranks, drawing in tens of thousands of new recruits each month. But does this truly indicate an upward trend for Putin's forces? Upon closer inspection, experts and analysts reveal a more nuanced story with troubling implications for the Kremlin. Investigative reporters from a prominent publication examined a wealth of warfare data, casualty figures, territorial control charts, and international analysis. Their findings point to a stark reality: while the West is punctuating the ongoing struggles of Ukraine, it overlooks the crucial detail that the territories controlled by Russia are minimal. Especially in light of the immense losses suffered during what was to be a pivotal moment in the conflict. As winter approaches, any optimistic outlook for a Russian victory appears increasingly dim. The situation suggests that Putin's efforts on the battlefield may be in vain. With mounting frustrations and dwindling options, the question looms: how long can this brutal conflict drag on before producing a decisive resolution, or further unraveling the Kremlin's ambitions? Will Putin admit defeat, or does he have one last card to play? In the conflict that grips Ukraine, the ground has shifted very little, yet the stakes have never been higher. The audacity of Vladimir Putin to keep pressing forward raises a chilling question: will he ever find a path to victory amidst overwhelming adversity? Despite amassing a staggering force of over 100,000 soldiers in what could be his third and largest offensive, the reality on the battlefield tells a different story. The battle for Donetsk city, specifically Okrovsk, has epitomized this struggle, a desperate attempt that might be better described as a futile gamble. The unyielding evidence paints a sobering picture. Satellite images and live conflict maps reveal how little territory Russia has actually gained. It's striking how, despite their initial surge capturing over 25% of Ukraine, they now control even less than they did during critical points in 2022. Imagine the chaos as tanks roll in, seemingly overwhelming Ukraine's defenses, only to meet the stiff resistance of a nation rising from its early struggles. Once Ukraine found its footing, it launched counteroffensives that would turn the tide. The front line stabilized, with Russia retreating to a grim status quo, managing only to hold around 20% of the territory, an unsettling stalemate. In a relentless cycle, Russian troops inch forward, claiming fragmented pieces of land adorned with wreckage, abandoned villages, and the echoes of lost homes. No significant cities have fallen under Russia's banner; instead, they merely exchange blows for little more than barren fields and desolation. As The Economist notes, the achingly slow progression highlights a battlefield mired in an interminable deadlock. Sound of gunfire can be heard echoing through these devastated lands, but what remains is a haunting silence, the kind that underscores lost aspirations and fragmented dreams. Will this conflict lead to a decisive resolution? Or will the world watch as a once powerful leader's ambitions crumble under the weight of stubborn resistance and countless failures? From the start, the bloody stalemate drags on in eastern Ukraine, where soldiers on both sides claw back tiny patches of dirt only to lose them again in an endless, grueling loop. The Economist's stark report underscores the cruel reality: Russia hasn't seized a single major city, leaving Putin's grandiose conquest as nothing but a fading illusion of triumph. Can you imagine the humiliation? Over 100,000 Russian troops thrown into a meat grinder since last October, all to choke out the last defiant city in Donetsk? Avdiivka, that forsaken stronghold, has bled them dry in failed surges, while assaults on nearby towns echo with artillery roars and the acrid stench of cordite hanging heavy in the cold winter air. Ukraine's fighters hold firm, their hands gripping scarred barbs, defending the vital defensive chain called the Donetsk stronghold, a network of cities buzzing with supply lines and unyielding spirit, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and Konstantinivka. Despite Russia's overwhelming edge and tanks rumbling like angry beasts and manpower flooding the fields like a human tide, they can't crack even one of these crucial hubs. 3 years into this nightmare, and the Kremlin's high hopes crumble, can we really expect victory soon when simple territorial gains slip through their fingers? Imagine the shock rippling through the Kremlin. Military analysts from The Economist warned that at this snail's pace, snapping up the 4 regions Putin ranted about in his special operation, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, would drag into 2030, a decade away. Full domination over all of Ukraine? They'd laugh if it weren't tragic. Estimates clock that at a whopping 103 years. Is that why whispers from Putin to Xi Jinping turned bizarre, debating eternal life and organ transplants, with the Russian leader murmuring about living to 150? At 73 now, even swallowing some mythical elixir of youth wouldn't let him witness Russia's flags draping the entire land he covets. His delusion shatters against the hard truth. This dream of empire lingers in the shadows, taunting him with every failed advance, but will it ever fade, or is this endless grind just the prelude to something even more devastating for his legacy? Whispers suggest Trump's supporters might bail him out, but with Finland's bold defiance echoing across borders, how long until the world's powers force Putin to confront his crumbling myth? For Vladimir Putin, the grand vision of a victorious Russia seems more like a fading mirage. As he stands at 73, even the fanciful idea of living to 150 won't allow him to see his ambitions for Ukraine materialize. His aspirations of conquest, once brimming with hope, now feel like hollow echoes of a distant past. The dream of fully annexing Ukraine slips further from his grasp, as the reality of Russia's sluggish advance slowly unravels any illusions of swift victory. In a startling revelation from a comprehensive economic report, shocking data surfaced regarding the staggering human cost of this conflict. Compiled from over 200 credible sources, the analysis revealed that Russian military losses since the invasion escalated to an unimaginable extent. The haunting numbers indicate that between 640,000 and 877,000 Russian soldiers have faced casualty, with the death toll estimating between 137,000 and 228,000. This was merely the tip of the iceberg. Fast forward to early October, and the grim figures have escalated sharply. Estimates now suggest that casualties have surged to between 984,000 and 1.4 million, with deaths climbing to between 190,000 and 480,000. The grim reality emerges: Russia has borne the brunt of the conflict with close to 1 million troops lost and around 200,000 lives extinguished. The British Ministry of Defense previously assessed that Russia reached rock bottom with an estimated 1 million casualties by the summer. Reflecting on the stark reality, the crushing weight of loss contrasts sharply with the meager territorial gains achieved. This war, marked by futility and devastation, stands as the most calamitous for Russia since World War II. The pall of loss hangs heavy, as families are shattered, brothers, husbands, fathers, and sons mourn for a cause that yields nothing but sorrow and despair. While Putin dreams of expansion, the ground beneath his ambitions crumbles, leaving nothing but a haunting silence where victory should be. As the echoes of a nation's grief resound through the land, the question lingers: what has truly been gained in the chaos? Even amidst high hopes, the stark reality is steeped in loss and suffering, weighing heavily on the future of not just a country, but a world still scarred by conflict. Will Putin's dream ever dare to transcend into reality, or remain a mere specter haunting the halls of power? The tale continues with each passing moment, where the cost of this ambition might just eclipse the very dream that fuels it. In the ongoing nightmare of war, Vladimir Putin finds himself caught in a web of deceit and desperation. He once believed that Russia would swiftly conquer Ukraine, but the reality is a stark contrast to his grand plans. The conflict that was expected to unfold rapidly has dragged on, leading to staggering losses and looming questions about territory and victory. It's not just the grim statistics of hundreds of thousands of soldiers lost that haunt the Kremlin, it's the bitter truth that Russia has not gained the significant footholds it sought. Instead of rolling into Ukrainian cities with celebrations of triumph, Russia's forces have been devoured by the relentless war machine, sacrificing young lives at an alarming rate. Families across Russia are left in mourning, their loved ones reduced to mere numbers in a grand gamble of conquest, while Putin throws in more troops like pawns on a chessboard, believing he can simply replenish his forces. Recent intelligence reports from Ukraine reveal that the Kremlin's recruitment goals are being met with alarming efficacy. 280,000 new recruits have been called up this year alone, and they aim to hit an unsustainable target of 343,000. But here lies the shocking reality: desperation drives this recruitment. The government is enlisting not just the brave, but also the broken, turning to prisons to fill its ranks. Convicted criminals, including violent offenders, are being offered second chances at life, trading freedom for the chaos of war. Even more alarming, recruiters are scouring hospitals, signing up individuals with serious health conditions as if they are interchangeable cogs in a devastating machine. Can a soldier with chronic ailments truly be effective in the heat of battle? Most who step forward do so not out of patriotism, but as a last resort to support their struggling families with the promise of money. This grim reality poses a haunting question: how long can Russia sustain this strategy before the fractures widen beyond repair? The Kremlin's actions echo loudly from the front lines to the very heart of its economy, which is crumbling. With staggering losses, a failing economy, and the dark shadow of despair looming over its military, is there a way out for Russia? Will Putin's reckless gamble unravel into chaos before his eyes, or does he still have a treacherous ace up his sleeve? The remnants of a bleak battlefield await, and with each passing day, the stakes grow ever higher. What happened next could redefine the very future of Eastern Europe. In a world teetering on the edge of conflict, the compelling clash between Russia and Ukraine unfolds, a saga of ambition, loss, and unyielding determination. For far too long, Vladimir Putin has held on to the belief that victory in Ukraine was just a matter of time. It was meant to be a swift operation, yet the battle stretches on, revealing that Ukraine remains resilient amidst the storm. What if the stakes are even higher than we realize? In the eyes of Putin, victory now seems reduced to obtaining a foothold in the Donbas region. All the while, Finland has thrown a stark challenge to Putin's authority, ensuring that he realizes his aspirations will never be recognized. Finnish President Alexander Stubb has made it unequivocally clear there will be no acceptance of Crimea as part of Russia, a powerful declaration echoed through the corridors of power in the Kremlin. The message has rattled Russia to its core, and while Putin may find solace in the support of allies like Donald Trump, the reality is stark. The cracks in Russia's facade are beginning to show. Finland, having cautiously decreased its reliance on Russia since the annexation of Crimea, illustrates that economic ties are not a measure of power, rather, they can serve as declarations of independence. Just how significant is this separation? A decade ago, 18% of Finland's imports came from Russia. That number plummeted to just 8% by 2022. Amidst this tense backdrop, Stubb has thrown down the gauntlet. Not only will any claims to Crimea be illegitimate, but the same applies to any other regions Russia might lay claim to during its aggression in Ukraine. Donetsk and Luhansk are not tools for Putin to manipulate. The only true arbiters of their fate are the brave souls of Ukraine. As Stubb stated, unequivocally, this is not Russia's land to take. But why does Putin have his sights set firmly on Donbas? The region is strewn with economic and strategic prizes, from rich farmland to coveted minerals. The allure of controlling these resources is nearly irresistible, as they promise to revitalize a beleaguered Russian economy grappling with losses from ongoing conflicts. However, his pursuit comes at a steep cost. Russian casualties have surged dramatically, making this year one of the bloodiest yet. Remarkably, figures indicate that Ukraine's losses stand at over 77,000 soldiers, with many more unaccounted for. The casualties speak of the ferocity of the conflict, forcing both sides into a deadly stalemate. The cry for advancement is met with lethal drone surveillance and the precision of long-range weaponry, turning every attempt to fortify lines into a desperate gamble of human lives. And yet, what if this enduring stalemate serves only to fuel further desperation? As both Vladimir Putin and his opponents brace for an unknown future, the question lingers: can either side truly claim victory in a war defined by loss? With world leaders like Stubb raising their voices in defiance, the stage is set for a gripping saga, one where every decision reverberates across borders and throughout history, leaving us to wonder who will emerge to write the final chapter. In the midst of a gripping conflict, a disheartening scene unfolds as estimates reveal that Ukraine has suffered devastating losses, with at least 77,403 soldiers claimed by the war, while another 77,842 remain unaccounted for. As the conflict rages on, reports indicate that this year alone, Ukraine has lost a minimum of 8,668 brave souls, a figure that stands as a chilling reminder of the cost of war. What if the real toll is even higher? Despite predictions that suggest devastating losses for both sides, the current statistics reveal something astonishing. For every Ukrainian soldier lost, around 5 Russian soldiers have met the same fate. This shocking disparity raises a critical question: how long can Russia sustain such levels of loss? Initially, when the battle began, recruitment into the Russian military seemed effortless, with enticing bonuses luring in eager volunteers. Many believed the propaganda, dreaming of quick victories and returning home triumphant. Yet, as the war dragged on and reality set in, the heroic facade blurred. Now, the narrative has shifted. New recruits are less enthusiastic, facing the harsh truth of potentially never returning home. With reluctance replacing eagerness, the Kremlin's recruitment efforts are becoming increasingly desperate. The reality sinks in: Russia might soon struggle to find willing participants for its military needs. As reluctant citizens face the prospect of enlisting, the Kremlin could be forced to raise incentives, ramping up sign-on bonuses to lure them in, a tactic that may only yield diminishing returns as the community becomes more entrenched in fear and opposition. Moreover, the bleak reality of the battlefield looms for those already injured. Reports suggest that only 40% of wounded soldiers will ever return to active duty, compounding Russia's manpower dilemma. As the drum of conflict continues to beat, one must ponder: will the Russian government resort to more far-fetched strategies to fill its ranks, or will the reality of its losses become an insurmountable burden that halts their ambitions? The outlook is grim. The conflict has morphed into a relentless battle, with the true cost rising higher each day. Putin's aspirations are obscured by the stark figures of loss, and the fleeting hope of quick victories fades. How long can this cycle of loss continue before the consequences become too heavy for even the mightiest power to bear? The unfolding story paints a chilling picture, one that challenges the very foundations upon which the conflict stands. As the crushing weight of recruitment dwindles grows heavier on Russia's shoulders, could Putin's empire be crumbling from within, with fewer brave souls willing to march into the fray? Imagine the eerie silence in draft offices, where once thriven posters now curl in neglect, and the bitter chill of winter creeps through cracked windows, a stark reminder of lives shattering. Russia is grappling with a grim reality: wounded warriors won't storm back into battle as easily as before. An International Institute for Strategic Studies report paints a brutal picture: only 40% of injured troops will ever regain the strength to fight again. Feel the rough grip of bandages, the sting of scars unhealed, echoing the screams that haunt empty barracks at night. Now, casting our eyes far ahead, what if this conflict drags on for endless years? Russia's future hangs on teenagers hitting 18 and being thrust into uniform. Last year, 800,000 Russian boys turned 18. But how many will truly crave the chaos of Ukraine's front lines? As the odor of gunpowder lingers in their memories, growing up under war's shadow, fewer young hearts will pound with misplaced pride. Will they dodge the call, hiding in the shadows? Picture the soft murmurs of doubt among families, the invisible chains binding dreams to fear. In the harsh truth of it all, Russia might scrape by with enough manpower for now, but this fragile thread will snap. Soon, there won't be fresh recruits to plug the gaping holes left by fallen comrades. Hear the distant rumble of unanswered mobilizations, a hollow drumbeat fading into despair. But soldiers are just the start of Russia's avalanche of loss. Equipment wreckage adds another layer of agony, as highlighted by economists. Open-source intelligence from the Dutch group ORYX reveals staggering destruction: over 12,500 tanks and armored fighting vehicles vaporized in the crucible of war. Plus, 2,674 artillery and missile systems silenced forever, 166 aircraft, fighters and bombers swallowed by fire, and 164 helicopters, their rotors still as death knells in ruined hangars. And here's the gut punch: these figures are mere underestimations. Real devastation could soar higher, with Ukrainian voices whispering of nearly 10,000 tanks obliterated and over 20,000 armored vehicles turned to twisted scrap. Feel the acrid smoke of melted metal clinging to the air, the gritty dust of crumbled earth under boots. While replacements might roll in, each demands mountains of money, precious time, and scarce resources Russia burns through at alarming speed. Their coffers empty, their factories straining under the weight. In a twist that humiliates the mighty, the tides turn. War evolves, inching toward Ukraine's edge. After a chilling halt in American aid from late 2023 to early 2024, allies now flood Ukraine with unprecedented backing, reviving hopes with the promise of long-range strike capabilities and intelligence shared like whispered secrets in the wind. Europe rallies too, pouring funds and weapons that sting like unrelenting barbs. Can Russia endure this onslaught, or is victory slipping through their fingers like sand? What hidden lifeline might save or doom Putin's legacy next? In a world that thrives on the tides of war and power struggles, one leader stands at a precipice, firmly believing that victory is within his grasp. For too long, Vladimir Putin has been convinced that Russia would emerge triumphant in its heated conflict with Ukraine. However, what was intended to be a swift victory has stalled, leaving Russia grappling for a foothold in a war it underestimated. Despite ambitions to take over territories, particularly in Donbass, recent developments show a stark contrast to Putin's expectations. The situation took an unexpected turn when Finnish President Alexander Stubb delivered a powerful message to Putin, articulating clearly that his country would never recognize Crimea as part of Russia. This resonated deeply, sending shockwaves through the Kremlin. Finland's diminishing trade relations with Russia highlighted a rapid shift. While 18% of Finland's imports came from Russia a decade ago, that number dwindled to a mere 8% following the invasion of Ukraine. Stubb's bold statements didn't stop with Crimea. He emphasized that any Russian claims over Luhansk and Donetsk, territories currently occupied by approximately 70% and 68% of the population speaking Russian, would be rejected. He reinforced that these lands belong to Ukraine, and this resolute stance carried a weight that echoed across Europe, asserting that territorial decisions must come from Ukrainians alone. The stakes are high. For Putin, Donbass represents not just a piece of land but a treasure trove of resources, including vital farmland and precious minerals. The economic allure, coupled with strategic military positioning in the Black Sea, makes Donbass a coveted prize. Yet there lies an undercurrent of desperation. Should Russia gain a foothold in Donbass, it could lead to further territorial ambitions beyond Ukraine. In a striking twist, Stubb has also called for Ukraine's accession to the European Union and NATO, aiming to secure its future independence. His words resonate with a sense of urgency, a plea for unity against Russian aggression. This starkly contrasts with Putin's previous remarks, where he claimed to have no issue with Ukraine's EU aspirations, highlighting a disconnect between rhetoric and reality. As Ukraine moves closer to EU membership, an unexpected challenge arises. The path is fraught with bureaucratic hurdles, and public confidence in the EU's commitment has been shaken. Yet, optimism prevails, as the European Commission expresses readiness to welcome Ukraine into its fold, suggesting that the tide might be turning in favor of Ukraine. With each day that passes, the conflict reveals its complexity. While Russia struggles internally from economic crises fueled by strategic strikes on its oil infrastructure, the narrative propagated by Putin begins to unravel. Even his loyal propagandists are forced to acknowledge the resilience and determination of Ukraine. Betrayals from within his ranks signal a shift that could threaten his grip on power. What does the future hold for Putin and the war-torn regions of Ukraine? The dynamics shift like sand beneath their feet. With a resilient Ukrainian response and strategic international alliances being forged, one can only wonder if the reality will align with the Kremlin's narrative or if a much harsher truth will unravel Putin's authority altogether. As the battle for Donbass continues, the story remains fraught with tension, leaving us to ponder, how long can the facade of strength endure against an unwavering front of determination? In our last tale, we saw Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader, clutching at straws in his endless Ukraine war. A war that dragged on, grinding hopes down like rusty gears. He pinned dreams on seizing Donbass, with its rich coal, metals, and ports. But Finland struck hard, refusing to recognize Crimea's theft or Donbass claims, slamming Putin with stinging insults. Stubb, Finland's president, declared no legitimacy for Russian grabs, even as trade ties frayed to shreds. And Stubb twisted the knife further, pushing for Ukraine's full EU and NATO entry, unbowed. Putin's authority fractures. Will he grasp at a lifeline from Donald Trump? Now, imagine the icy bite of Moscow's night air. Putin's grasp slipping further into chaos. His loyal voices crumbling like autumn leaves underfoot. Can this tyrant withstand betrayal from within? Shockingly, yes, Vladimir Solovyov, Kremlin's fiercest cheerleader, whispers cracks of doubt. On October 13, the air in the studio felt heavier. Cameras rolled on Russia's Evening with Vladimir Solovyov. No roaring boasts that day. Solovyov sat pallid, voice wavering like a dying radio signal. His usual fiery chants muted. Sweat beading on his brow. Fingertips drumming nervously against the desk. We underestimated, he murmured, eyes darting off-screen. NATO sent not just gear. Now their factories hum outside Ukraine. Strikes falter. Secrets leak. A guttural sigh escaped him. Foreigners flood Ukraine's lines. No illusions left. Rhetorical sting, what if your own echo turns accusing? Solovyov's words hung like frost on glass. Putin, tucked in the Kremlin. Rage bubbling like overboiling tea. This puppet, after endless rants proclaiming Ukraine's doom, now confessed flaws. Russia's missteps exposed. Strategic blunders, pinned partly on NATO? Sure, Western aid flows like a relentless river. Missiles, tanks, intel bolstering Ukraine's stand. Yet Solovyov, wittingly or not, spotlighted Ukraine's grit. Without NATO crutches? Ukrainian forces forge ahead, causing galactic chasms in Russian plans. And explore we will how Ukraine surges, rifles gleaming, boots thundering on battlefields. Darker revelation, this critique? Not Solovyov's debut. Flashback to February 2023. War's first year, Putin boasting a swift win. Solovyov paused mid-rant, voice cracking. What state is our military in? He probed, words tasting bitter as stale bread. Rus defenses unraveling? Solovyov hinted then. Now, full admission shatters the facade. Putin's prized mouthpiece exposes voids, underestimation of NATO's machine, inefficacious blows, foreign warriors swelling Ukraine. Kremlin walls echo with whispered fears. Propaganda cracks whiter than a frozen lake. Yet Putin scrambles, humiliated yet clawing. Will he lash out, or cling to hopes in Trump? As winds howl outside the Bolshoi theater, distant cannon rumbles a reminder. The war's wounds deepen, alliances fray. Rhetoric question bait, can one man's doubt topple an empire? Cliffhanger looms, what twisted alliances brew as winter's shadow looms? Solovyov's betrayal merely the start of Putin's unraveling tapestry? In the midst of a turbulent chapter in Eastern Europe, an unexpected voice emerges from the chaos. For far too long, Vladimir Putin clung to the belief that Russia would swiftly emerge victorious in its war against Ukraine. He envisioned a quick conquest, a mere blip in history. However, reality has proven far more complex. As each day passes, the dream of a rapid defeat for Ukraine slips further away, revealing Russia's struggle and its dwindling grip on the narrative. As tensions escalate, Finland enters the fray with a powerful message, shaking the Kremlin to its core. Finnish President Alexander Stubb recently made a bold declaration on a prominent BBC broadcast: Finland will never recognize Crimea as part of Russia. This startling statement is not just a political jab, it is a resounding assertion of sovereignty that sends shockwaves through Moscow. The situation in Ukraine remains dire, yet Putin clings to hope. He eyes the Donbass regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, seeking territorial gains to bolster his failing ambitions. His dreams include controlling this economically and strategically vital area, a territory rich in minerals, lush farmlands, and symbolic for many native Russian speakers who reside there. Yet, the dream of conquest is met with resistance, as Ukraine stands firm in its resolve. Stubb, with piercing clarity, emphasizes, this is not Russia's land to take. He underscores that only Ukrainians can determine their fate, dismissing Moscow's claims as hollow and illegitimate. This declaration is a powerful reminder that Putin, regardless of his desires, is facing a formidable opponent, the unwavering spirit of Ukraine. The war rages on, but with every passing moment, the notion of Ukraine conceding the Donbas territory seems increasingly implausible. President Zelensky has made it clear, he will not trade vital land for peace. The stakes are high, and tension hangs thick in the air. Every movement, every decision influences the course of this ongoing battle. Beyond the battlefield, a different conflict brews, one that is psychological and ideological. Russia's state media, once a bastion of unwavering support for the Kremlin, now begins to echo doubts. Notably, propagandist Solyov, who has been known for his fierce loyalty to Putin, hesitates in his rhetoric. His recent comments reflect an unsettling truth: Russia's military is not meeting expectations, and Ukraine's strength was drastically underestimated. In a surprising turn during a broadcast earlier this year, he asked pointedly, if we are serious about this fight, what are we truly using? His tone was somber, not filled with the previously fiery rhetoric. Instead, it was a reflection of the gravity of Russia's situation. The assertion that the conflict has morphed from a special military operation to a full-fledged battle against NATO allies reveals a tactical and strategic pivot that has left many in the Kremlin uneasy. As the winter months approach, the grim realities of war loom large. Will Putin's forces reclaim the momentum, or will Solyov's insights become a rallying cry for change? The chilling silence in the Kremlin, juxtaposed with the resolute actions and statements from Ukraine and its allies, poses an intriguing question: has the tide finally begun to turn? The clarity of Finland's stance and the insurgent spirit of Ukraine may be enough to extinguish the flames of misplaced ambition lingering in Moscow. Thus, the world watches, holding its breath, as the future unfolds in unpredictable ways. With every declaration, every shift in strategy, the narrative continues to evolve, setting the stage for a tumultuous showdown that could reshape the landscape of Eastern Europe for generations to come. Will the echoes of resistance drown out the lingering whispers of empire? Only time will tell. For too long, Vladimir Putin has operated under the illusion that Russia would swiftly conquer Ukraine. The expectations were set for a rapid victory, but what unfolded was a protracted conflict. Russia's strategy aimed to undermine Ukraine, yet that goal remains unfulfilled. Now, Putin's diminishing hopes have turned to convincing Ukraine to relinquish control of Donbas. However, Finland has emerged as an unexpected challenger, delivering a powerful message that leaves Putin on shaky ground. Finland's president, Alexander Stubb, recently made headlines with his forthright statements on BBC Radio, declaring unequivocally that Finland will never recognize Crimea as part of Russia. The region, illegally annexed by Putin in 2014, has been in Russian hands for years, yet Stubb's words signify a seismic shift. Despite the historical ties that some might claim, Finland has been deliberately reducing its reliance on Russia for trade, cutting imports from 18% in 2012 to a mere 8% by 2022, coinciding with the invasion of Ukraine. But Stubb's remarks didn't stop at Crimea. He addressed the looming threat of Donbas, stating that any Russian claim to the territory is illegitimate. As Russian troops currently occupy significant portions of Luhansk and Donetsk, Stubb made it clear, the fate of these areas rests solely in Ukrainian hands. His assertion resonated with urgency: this is not Russia's land to take, leaving a bitter taste for Putin, who has long desired to expand his territorial claims. Russia's fixation on Donbas is fueled by various factors. Economically, its industrial potential and fertile farmland beckon to Putin as a way to revitalize the stagnant Russian economy. The region is rich in minerals, including precious metals and significant reserves of natural resources. Given the current situation, where Russia holds a substantial portion of Ukraine's resources, the stakes have never been higher. Strategically, control of Donbas would grant Russia year-round access to the Black Sea, amplifying its naval capabilities. But beyond the tangible benefits, there's a deeper psychological layer. Donbas symbolizes Russian heritage, with a majority of its residents speaking Russian at home. Putin's narrative that the region rightfully belongs to Russia relies on these cultural claims,
losing it would undermine his justification for continued aggression.
Yet, the prospect of Ukraine ceding control is unthinkable for President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's made it crystal clear, Donbas will not be traded for peace. With Stubb backing him up, any attempt by Russia to annex Ukrainian lands will be met with firm resistance. Not only does Ukraine stand strong, but Finland's growing diplomatic support signals a unified front against Russian imperialism. Additionally, Stubb championed Ukraine's aspirations to join both the European Union and NATO. He emphasized Ukraine's right to sovereignty and independence. The interplay between Ukraine's EU ambitions and Putin's historical disdain for Ukraine as a sovereign entity underscores the high stakes. While Russia may not officially oppose Ukraine's EU membership, the reality remains that Putin envisioned Ukraine under Russian dominion long before now. With Ukraine in the process of EU membership negotiations, there lies hope. The European Commission has signaled its willingness to welcome Ukraine into the fold. Prominent voices such as Ursula von der Leyen are advocating for unity and resilience in the face of aggression, reinforcing that Europe stands with Ukraine. However, the road to membership won't be quick. Even with a streamlined process, meeting bureaucratic requirements can stretch out. The question remains, how long will Ukraine's resilience hold against Russian advances? Time isn't on Putin's side, and as dissent grows among Russian propagandists, the narrative is slowly shifting. What happens when the voices of dissent drown out propaganda in the Kremlin? The war's toll has begun to fracture the very foundation of Putin's support. As more insiders acknowledge the dismal reality of Russia's military capabilities, the once ironclad narrative of invincibility is beginning to crack. Faced with potential defeat, can Putin pivot to salvage his legacy amidst the chaos? The stakes are higher than ever, and as the landscape shifts, the world watches with bated breath. It's a volatile game of power, and for each move made, the consequences could reshape the future of both nations forever. In our last installment, we uncovered the grim reality: Russia's slow progress means a full occupation of Ukraine could drag on for 108 years, hindered by a shrinking population. Putin's propagandists are stirring, forced to face the truth as Ukraine stands united against the tide. Imagine the thunderous collapse of a once unstoppable machine, gears grinding to a halt in a symphony of deceit and denial. Can you hear it? The Kremlin's iron grip on truth slipping away, voices that once roared propaganda now whispering doubts into the wind. For years, these state-controlled narrators spun tales of inevitable Russian victory, but cracks have appeared. A propagandist named Solovyev, pinned down by uncomfortable facts, blamed NATO's interference for Ukraine's stubborn defense. Weapons from allies? Sure. But rewind the clock, Ukraine has transformed, evolving into a military powerhouse that mocks Putin's predictions of swift collapse. No, it's deeper: a rebirth ignited by the fire of invasion. Ukraine isn't just holding ground, it's forging an armor of resilience that grows sharper each day. Picture the cool steel of determination clashing against the stale scent of fear-mongering lies. Blind arrogance led Putin to underestimate this metamorphosis. Back in 2014, when Crimea fell like a domino in the shadows, Ukraine's army limped along, barely 130,000 soldiers, with a pitiful 6,000 battle-ready. Supplies? A desperate plea for blankets and rations as obsolescence seeped in. 3/4 of equipment screamed antiquity, older than forgotten relics. Obsolete tanks numbered just 12 out of 800. Aircraft grounded at 85% idle. The underbelly of neglect stung like a winter gale. Yet, from that low ebb to 2022, Ukraine shed its weakness like snakeskin, undetected by the aggressor engrossed in overconfidence. Did Putin glance over his shoulder through rose-tinted glasses, dreaming of a quick conquest? Yes. But Ukraine's counterstroke proved him a fool, discarding old shackles for modern might. Now, as battles rage, Russia grapples with an enemy tougher than ever, or perhaps, weaker in resolve itself. Suddenly, a rogue whisper from Putin's inner circle: what if the shadows reveal more than victories? Will the Kremlin admit defeat before the echo fades? In a world dominated by power plays and military might, Ukraine has undergone a remarkable transformation. Since 2014, the nation has grown exponentially, fortifying its defenses against an aggressor that underestimated its resolve.
Vladimir Putin's prior assumptions led him to believe that his forces could swiftly overtake Ukraine, but they were gravely mistaken. As clashes erupted, it became clear the spirit of the Ukrainian people had evolved, fueled by a determination that had only toughened in the years since. In a shocking turn of events, Ukraine has rallied its forces. In just 8 years, the active military personnel surged to about 1 million, eclipsing other European armies outside of Russia. This mobilization, a staggering fourfold increase, has not only fortified the front lines but has also integrated cutting-edge weaponry provided by Western allies. The Atlantic Council has noted that this burgeoning might is an often overlooked aspect of the ongoing conflict, echoing concerns voiced by Putin's own affiliates about their underestimation of Ukrainian strength. But what truly sets Ukraine apart isn't just the numbers of boots on the ground. It's a newfound sense of military independence and innovation. No longer solely dependent on external aid, Ukraine is crafting its own arsenal. The percentage of self-produced weaponry has skyrocketed. By mid-2025, the country projected an astounding $35 billion investment in its domestic missile and drone manufacturing, a significant leap from only 10% production at the onset of the conflict. The war, though brutal, has ignited a remarkable growth in the defense industry. As sirens wail and skies tremble from enemy strikes, Ukraine's resolve remains unyielding. The combination of aggressive modernization and newfound production capabilities has placed Ukraine on a self-reliance trajectory. But what happens when a nation that once barely defended itself emerges as a formidable military force? Expect the unexpected as we delve deeper into Ukraine's military evolution. Are they merely bracing for survival, or are they plotting a counteroffensive that could alter the balance of power in Eastern Europe? Buckle up as we unravel the stunning narrative of a nation reborn in the crucible of conflict, striving to reclaim its sovereignty and ensure its place on the global stage. In the heart of an ongoing struggle, the narrative of Ukraine's defense industry evolves rapidly. The beginning of the invasion revealed a disheartening statistic: Ukraine produced merely 10% of its own armaments. Over time, however, a remarkable transformation began to unfold. Fast forward 2 years, that percentage had surged to 35%, and it soared to 40% by mid-2025, as noted by President Zelensky. The country is not only escalating its military capabilities but also reshaping its destiny. Zelensky, addressing the parliament, expressed ambitions for even greater advancements. "We're redefining our defense sector's management and production," he declared, envisioning a future where Ukrainian-made weapons would constitute a significant portion of the military's arsenal. The goal was ambitious: within 6 months, Ukrainians would have a majority of homegrown weapons, aiming for 50%. And they weren't just on track, they were surpassing expectations. By September, it was reported by The Guardian that about 60% of the weaponry utilized by Ukrainian forces was now domestically produced. This striking progress has led to a new narrative, one where Ukraine is not just reliant on foreign aid but is also innovating and developing advanced military resources independently. Zelensky's figures indicated that the new weapons being produced are among the most sophisticated in the nation's history. It raises the question: was Russia prepared for this formidable advancement? As the battlefield continues to echo with the sounds of conflict, it's clear that Ukraine's resilience is not merely a result of foreign support but also of internal growth. The defense industry's evolution is far beyond simplistic views, revealing an adaptive nation determined to stand its ground. The Kremlin's perception of Ukraine's military capabilities is gravely outdated, as indicated by Solyov's warnings. With every explosion and clash, it becomes increasingly evident, Ukraine is not merely defending its territory but reimagining its role on the global stage. The nation is crafting a narrative of strength and determination. As it stands on the brink of a new era in which its independence and sovereignty remain unyielding, one has to wonder, how will this transformative journey reshape the power dynamics in Eastern Europe? Can the world, witnessing this unprecedented military evolution, afford to underestimate the spirit and capability of a nation rising from ashes? The answers to these questions may lie on the horizon, where the future of Ukraine holds untold potential. In the shadows of a crumbling empire, whispers of collaboration echo like distant thunder. Ukraine's allies, led by a pearl of initiative from the United States, funnel aid straight into weapon purchases. This deepens bonds that propagandists decry, but it's a fair exchange.
Strength flows both ways. Allies bolster Ukraine, and Ukraine sharpens allies. Can a leader's arrogance birth his own downfall?
Picture the iron grip of Vladimir Putin, his plans rotting like neglected ruins. He unleashed a war he thought he'd master, only to forge a foe far mightier. Ukraine's army swells, armored in unprecedented might.
Weapons once dormant now pulse in Ukrainian factories, born of invasion's spark.
Alliances, forged in battle's forge, burn stronger than any peace might have allowed.
Perhaps Solovyov's veiled warnings hit the mark, though unspoken.
Putin's overreach awakens a beast Russia can't tame.
Ukraine isn't just larger, it's wiser, twisting tactics like a serpent in the mist.
Amid the stench of scorched earth, it hones weapons that pierce Russian armor deepest. Two shadows loom, precise long-range missiles and buzzing drones, humming like angry hornets.
On the long-range front, strikes thunder across Russia's heart.
Military posts quiver under impact, the air thick with smoke and fury.
Oil refineries, vital lifelines, have been pummeled relentlessly.
In 2025, targets locked on, crippling nearly 40% of refining capacity by strikes through August to October. The ground vibrates with explosions, fuel scarcity biting deep, forcing Putin to claw for imported supplies. Ukraine dances this deadly waltz knowingly.
Its moves? Starve the enemy, turn the tide.
But what hidden cards does Russia hold, still shrouded in the fog of war?
Building on that seismic shift, Ukraine's smart strikes rip at Russia's economic veins.
Long-range weapons and drones don't just attack, they maul with precision. The roar of impact shatters the silence of occupied lands, where sweat-stung soldiers man defenses.
Oil refineries, once pillars of might, now bleed black oil onto frostbitten soil. They'd borne the brunt in 2025. August screams into memory, a month of relentless barrages. September follows, flames licking the night sky. October caps it with a crescendo, devastating nearly 40% of Russia's refining prowess.
Fuel shortages spread like a bitter chill, the acrid smell of burning permeating every village. Putin, face etched with fury, scrambles for ports to import what Russia once produced at home.
Ukraine, eyes gleaming with foresight, knows the game. It's economic strangulation, a twist that humiliates the aggressor, turning his empire into a beggar.
Yet, how long before Putin counters with a shock that silences the thunder?
The battlefield evolves, Ukraine strikes not random.
Sensor-laden air hums with purpose, pinning targets with deadly accuracy.
Strikes carve into Russia's underbelly, exposing vulnerabilities once hidden. Oil refineries stand as prime prey, their muffled booms shaking earth as infernos rage.
In 2025 alone, the assault peaks. Imagine the tactile jolt of each hit, the greasy film of hydrocarbons staining everything.
From August's initial volleys to September's fiery retribution, the pressure mounts. October delivers the finale, obliterating around 40% of refining output. Fuel dries up swiftly, a palpable absence in engines that sputter and die.
Russia, humbled, must beg from distant shores for what it claims as its own.
Ukraine's strategy? Pure genius, weakening the fortress from within. It laughs in the face of Putin's boasts. But what if this spark ignites a desperate Russian gambit? The air thickens with tension. Ukraine's precision warriors redefine war's tapestry. Each drone's whir and missile shriek paints terror in vivid strokes. The taste of victory sharpens, yet Russia's resilience lurks. Strikes zero in on facilities, from bunkers to pipelines, the ground trembling underfoot. Oil refineries crumble, their shattering echoes resounding. In 2025, the offensive intensifies. August ignites a chain, September fans the blaze, and October extinguishes hopes. Nearly 40% of refineries destroyed. Shortages claw at Russia's skin, a cold burn demanding ports for salvation. Ukraine orchestrates this symphony masterfully, draining power from within. It embarrasses Putin, turning his campaign into a farce. What unseen horror awaits as Russia digs deeper? For Ukraine, these moves are deliberate weaponry scalpel.
Facilities quiver under assault, smoke curling like ominous sigils.
Drones drone overhead, their shadows racing terror. long-range arms strike true, the air vibrating with unleashed energy. Oil refineries, throbbing hearts of industry, falter. The 2025 onslaught, August's salvos, September's fury, October's reckoning, gutting 40% of capacity. Fuel evaporates, a ghost haunting depots. Importing becomes the bitter pill Russia swallows. Ukraine wields knowledge like a hidden blade, dismantling foes. It humiliates the invader, exposing hollow might. Yet, can a defeated lion find claws anew? Pressure builds, cliffs edge closer. Let's delve into a dramatic chapter of modern warfare, where the tides have turned in unexpected ways. For far too long, Vladimir Putin held on to the belief that Russia would quickly emerge victorious in the saga against Ukraine. His assumptions crumbled as the war dragged on. What was intended to be a swift conflict transformed into a grueling battle. The initial strategy was to wear Ukraine down, but the opposite became reality. In a stunning twist, Finland, with its unyielding stance, delivered a stinging rebuke to Putin's ambitions. Finnish President Alexander Stubb made it crystal clear, Finland would never acknowledge Crimea as a part of Russia, nor would it accept any further territorial claims stemming from the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. This unexpected declaration sent shockwaves through the Kremlin, as it laid bare the delicate balance of power that Putin thought he could control. As the dust settled from this political earthquake, feelings of desperation began to weigh heavily on Putin's shoulders. Despite the setbacks, he still believed there was hope. Might former U.S. President Donald Trump act as a potential ally in this scenario? While Putin clung to such thoughts, Stubb stood firm, emphasizing that the fate of Donetsk and Luhansk regions currently under Russian occupation was not for Russia to decide. Ukraine, he asserted, held the keys to their own future. The stakes are high. Putin craves the industrial wealth of Donbas, and its fertile lands are not just bounties of resources, they represent an economic lifeline for a faltering Russia. If he could capture these territories, he could orchestrate a turnaround. With approximately 40% of Ukraine's mineral wealth already in Russian hands, the stakes couldn't be higher. This land, rich in coal and lithium deposits, adds an impressive $12 trillion to Putin's aspirations. Yet, the conflict intertwines with deep-seated emotions. Donbas is home to many native Russian speakers, shaping the narrative that Putin has exploited to justify his invasions. Political scientists argue that the very fabric of Russia's justification for this war weaves a tale both compelling and tragic. Symbolically, Donbas is vital to Russia, a prize that would lend credence to his claims and actions. But what if Ukraine stands firm? President Zelensky has vocally defended Ukraine's sovereignty, vowing never to concede Donbas for a desperate peace, regardless of Putin's maneuvers. Meanwhile, as Stubb adds his influence, he sends a strong message: should Russia annex parts of Donbas without Ukraine's consent, it will face the collective condemnation of Finland and the wider European community. In another surprising turn, Stubb boldly declared that Ukraine must be ushered into the European Union, and ideally NATO, to secure its future. The prospect of Ukraine's EU membership seems within reach, as negotiations have begun and enthusiasm from Europe is growing. Yet, will Russia sit idly by, turning a blind eye to Ukraine's burgeoning aspirations? As Finland positions itself as a staunch ally to Ukraine, Putin finds himself increasingly isolated, weighed down by the contradictions of his own narrative and the stubborn resilience of the Ukrainian resistance. In the heart of this turbulent chapter, the world watches. This saga is far from its final act. Would the looming possibility of EU membership be a valuable asset to Ukraine, or merely a fleeting dream in the churning chaos? Stay tuned as this gripping battle unfolds, revealing the unexpected twists and untold stakes in a conflict that reshapes our understanding of power, sovereignty, and resilience in these uncertain times. In the chaos of war, the unthinkable can happen. A missile intended to protect can turn against its own. Reports emerged that during a Ukrainian drone strike over Crimea, a Russian fighter jet became its own worst enemy. Instead of intercepting the threat, Russian air defenses mistakenly shot down their own Su-30. This incident, described by Ukrainian naval spokesperson Dmytro Pletenchuk, sheds light on a deep-seated incompetence within the Russian military. Surrounded by panic and urgency, Russian forces failed to defend their claims on occupied territories. Could this blunder mark a turning point in the conflict?
As the Ukrainian drones soared, the tension crackled through the air. It was a night filled with the sounds of incoming threats, a constant reminder of the high stakes involved. The command to scramble their aircraft rang out, but they were too late.
A missile, instead of striking a foreign aircraft, caused chaos and destruction within their ranks.
Ukrainian sources intercepted eerie radio transmissions detailing the ejection of the Su-30 crew as the engines faltered, flames consuming what was once a symbol of Russian might.
This catastrophic failure raises so many questions. How can a military apparatus that prides itself on superiority falter so drastically?
The evidence provided by Ukrainian intelligence leads to one inescapable conclusion: either the air defense system malfunctioned, or a critical misunderstanding in their operations led to this disastrous outcome. With no signs of Ukrainian forces ever having hit the jet, it becomes clearer the true enemy of the Russian forces might just lie within their own ranks.
In the midst of turmoil and rising cost of war, Putin's ambitions hang by a thread.
As Ukraine strengthens its use of drones, responsible for 80% of Russian casualties, what lies ahead remains uncertain. The truth is being unveiled, and if Russia continues to falter like this, it could mean a profound shift in power dynamics on the battlefield.
Are we witnessing the beginning of the end for Putin's grand ambitions in Ukraine? Or are there still cards left to play in this high-stakes game of power and control?
For too long, Vladimir Putin has lived in a delusion, believing that the war in Ukraine would be a swift victory. Initially expected to weaken Ukraine significantly, Russia's plans have backfired.
Now, the Kremlin's chief aim is to persuade Ukraine to relinquish territory in the Donbas region, but Finland has just delivered a double blow to Putin's ambitions.
During a recent interview on BBC Radio, Finnish President Alexander Stubb made it crystal clear: Finland will never recognize Crimea as Russian territory.
This bold declaration sent shockwaves through the Kremlin, shaking Putin's confidence to its foundation.
The annexation, which occurred in 2014, was meant to solidify Russia's grip, but Finland's stance shows they refuse to acknowledge Putin's authority over the peninsula. Finland's relationship with Russia has been dwindling for nearly a decade, with trade dwindling from 18% of imports in 2012 to a mere 8% by 2022, following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. When Stubb emphasized that Finland would not recognize any further territorial claims by Russia stemming from the war, including Luhansk and Donetsk, he highlighted the reality that only Ukrainians have the right to determine the fate of their land. Putin's obsession with capturing the Donbas is fueled by its strategic, economic, and symbolic importance. Once a thriving industrial hub, the region is also rich in resources like lithium and precious metals. It offers Russia a way to regain economic stability after the war. Controlling the Donbas would not only bolster Putin's economic ambitions but also serve as a propaganda tool to assert historical claims of Russian dominance. Yet, despite the Kremlin's mayhem, Ukraine stands tall under President Zelensky's unwavering resolve not to surrender any territory. As Stubbs' remarks echoed through the political landscape, he confidently declared that any annexation by Russia would not hold legitimacy, a strong statement that adds fuel to the fire already burning beneath Putin's ambitions. But that was just the beginning. Stubb went on to assert that Ukraine should seek membership in the European Union, EU, and ideally NATO, to guarantee its sovereignty and independence. The prospect of Ukraine joining the EU is not just hopeful rhetoric, it has now become a possibility, with the EU showing support for this path. Could Ukraine's entry into the EU become a game-changer in the conflict with Russia? While Putin claims he remains unbothered by Ukraine's EU aspirations, it could not be further from the truth. His vision of a Russia that dominates its eastern neighbor is increasingly at odds with Ukraine's fight for recognition and autonomy. As the situation unfolds, two critical questions arise: will Ukraine successfully navigate the path to EU membership, and will NATO ultimately embrace the country within its ranks? Recent developments hint at a hopeful urgency, yet challenges lie ahead. In a world where alliances shift like sand, one truth remains clear: the fabric of Ukraine's defense is woven tightly with international partners, while its military capabilities continue to grow. The narrative around Ukraine's strength contradicts the Kremlin's propaganda. Ukraine is not just surviving, it is thriving, forging partnerships that extend its manufacturing prowess and creating a defense industry that is far from vulnerable to Russian attacks.
Can the Kremlin continue to dismiss Ukraine's escalating abilities?
As we delve deeper into this intricate geopolitical chess game, one thing becomes evident: the stakes have never been higher. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has taken an unexpected turn, revealing the dramatic struggles within the Russian military. Reports have surfaced that Ukraine's unmanned vehicles are responsible for an astonishing 80% of casualties inflicted on Russian forces. This number could rise as Ukraine collaborates with Western allies to enhance drone technology, including a new project known as Artemis. The momentum of this technological advancement puts Russia in a precarious position, illustrating a narrative far removed from the Kremlin's propaganda.
Amid these developments, a shocking incident occurred near Crimea. Confident in its defense capabilities, Russia launched a fierce aerial response to intercept incoming Ukrainian drones.
However, in a disastrous blunder, they mistakenly targeted their own Su-30 fighter jet instead of the enemy drones. The pride of Russia's air force transformed into a blazing wreckage as one of their most valued aircraft was shot down by their own defenses. This monumental failure showcased the severe lapses in Russia's military operations, unraveling a facade of invincibility. The chaotic downfall of the Su-30, as reported by the Kiev Independent, laid bare the incompetence of Russian military strategies. Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy, conveyed that it was likely a friendly fire incident during a desperate attempt to repel the drone strike. Intercepted radio communications corroborated this account, revealing a snapshot of utter disarray on Russia's side. As Ukraine further develops its drone capabilities, the question looms larger: can the Russian military adapt and recover from these blunders? While Russian propaganda tries to deflect blame onto NATO, the reality emerges: Ukraine's resilience has transformed it into a formidable adversary that may refuse to fall. Putting this situation into perspective, we sense the agony and triumph of immediate conflict. The sounds of engines roaring and missiles blasting fill the air, mingling with the acrid smell of smoke as nations clash. It is a brutal battlefield where both hope and despair resonate with the characters caught in the episode. The parallels of past failures challenge the drive for future successes, leaving viewers eager and anxious for what unfolds next. With setbacks mounting and Ukraine's determination unwavering, the narrative intensifies: what comes next for the Russian military amidst growing Ukrainian defiance? Are further drone advancements on the horizon? The war's outcome may depend significantly on Russia's next strategic moves. In a tense battle playing out on the world stage, Ukraine's military capabilities are much stronger than the Kremlin dares to admit. Amid a chilling atmosphere filled with propaganda and uncertainty, a prominent Russian commentator is urgently warning his audience that they should not underestimate Ukraine's growing strength. As the nation tirelessly works to bolster its defense, the path forward seems to wind through collaboration with international allies. Ukraine's quest for self-sufficiency in arms production is gaining traction, and while it isn't completely self-reliant yet, the momentum is palpable. Remarkably, about 80% of drones used by the Ukrainian military are now crafted within its borders, thanks to innovative partnerships with countries like Denmark and Poland. These collaborations not only enhance Ukraine's arms manufacturing capabilities but also establish a protective network that makes it increasingly difficult for adversaries to disrupt their production lines. As the sounds of war echo through the region, collaborative projects are reshaping Ukraine's defense landscape. Take the Artemis drone, for instance, a symbol of this partnership. Although it retains a Ukrainian design, its advanced software is developed by a US-based company, illustrating how vital international support has become in this relentless fight. The US and other NATO-aligned nations are playing significant roles, yet those like Solyov fail to recognize the agency Ukraine has in forging these partnerships. Further complicating the narrative of aggression, Ukraine has aligned itself with the Czech Initiative, orchestrating a coalition that delivers millions of artillery shells from various donor nations. The realization dawns: their network of production not only shields them from Russian bombardments but also ensures that the hard work put into building a formidable military still holds strong. But can this web of alliances hold? Will the continuous influx of international support and technology be enough to turn the tide against a relentless foe? As the contours of this conflict blur and reshape, one thing remains starkly clear: underestimating Ukraine and its strategic partnerships could be a grave mistake for those who still buy into the Kremlin's misleading narratives. In a world where one man's ambition leads to devastating conflict, the stakes have never been higher.
For too long, Vladimir Putin was certain that Russia would emerge victorious in its war against Ukraine.
This triumph, however, was supposed to be swift and decisive.
Yet, the reality has unraveled dramatically. Instead of tiring Ukraine into submission, the fighting has fueled a fierce national resilience. Now, the goal in Putin's eyes is clear: force Ukraine to yield territories in Donbass. But Finland has stepped boldly onto the stage, delivering a stinging rebuke to the Russian leader's aspirations.
Finnish President Alexander Stubb has proclaimed that his nation will never recognize Crimea as part of Russia, an unwavering stance that cuts deeply into Putin's confidence. After all, Crimea, annexed in 2014, remains a sore spot this decade later. Stubb's words echo across the political landscape, sending shockwaves through the Kremlin.
Russia's leader is feeling the pressure, and it's only getting worse. Let's consider the underlying dynamics.
In an October 18 broadcast on BBC Radio, President Stubb made it crystal clear: Finland's decision to reject the legitimacy of Russian claims is not merely rhetoric.
The data backs him up. Trade with Russia has dwindled from 18% in 2012 to a mere 8% by 2022.
Actions speak volumes, and Finland's decreasing reliance on Russian imports can be felt acutely in Moscow.
Yet, Stubb's concerns don't end with Crimea. As he highlighted in his address, this sentiment extends to any region that Russia tries to claim as a result of its aggression in Ukraine.
With the ongoing conflict leaving Luhansk and Donetsk under heavy Russian occupation, Stubb, without hesitation, reminded Putin that these territories belong to Ukraine alone.
The implications are profound.
If Russia believes it can seize Donbass, it is sorely mistaken.
But what motivates Putin's fixation on this land? Al Jazeera paints a picture replete with economic, strategic, and symbolic significance. The Donbass region, beset by war, boasts rich agricultural land and abundant minerals, vital assets that Putin hopes to exploit. Yet, the symbolism is perhaps more urgent for him. Donbass represents a connection to Russian identity, a thread woven throughout the fabric of the Kremlin's narrative. If Ukraine surrenders this ground, it would bolster Putin's justifications for the invasion and further threaten Ukraine's sovereignty. Yet, what if Ukraine's defiance has been fueled by more than just resolve? Reports have emerged that Ukrainian drones have turned the tables, inflicting up to 80% of Russian casualties.
Imagine a swarm of unmanned vehicles dominating the skies, an ominous harbinger for Russian forces. As Ukraine collaborates with Western partners to develop next-generation drones, this dynamic could soon shift further. Underestimating their adversary has been a critical mistake for Russia. In an embarrassing turn of events, the Russian military experienced a catastrophic failure, accidentally shooting down its own Su-30 fighter jet while trying to defend Crimea from a drone strike. This incident, reported by the Kyiv Independent, exemplifies not only military incompetence but also the chaos that ensues when desperation rules the battlefield. But the question lingers: how will Russia respond? In light of Finland's firm stance, and with increasing resistance from Ukraine bolstered by innovative technology, the conflict teeters on a knife's edge. Each side grapples with conflicting aspirations, and the reality of modern warfare unfolds amidst a backdrop of monumental stakes and fierce determination. Will Ukraine emerge from this conflict as an empowered nation, or is trouble on the horizon for Europe's future? As tensions rise, and every decision made echoes across continents, one truth prevails: the struggle for power draws closer to its explosive climax. The world holds its breath, awaiting the next chapter in a saga that intertwines resilience, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of sovereignty.